Hello, my name is Dave Herman. I'm a technologist supporting Salt Lake City Emergency Management and the Emergency Operations Center. This is a quick presentation on crisis communications, focusing on emergency tools for the phone. Today's date is February 4th, 2022. So this is about 10 minutes, and we are going to focus on a couple of different things. First of all, we will look at some of the conditions existent during and after a disaster. We'll look at some tools that we can utilize with our cell phone to best prepare. And then we'll also focus on federal programs known as GETS and Wireless Priority Service, which will prove useful after disaster. So there are a variety of tools that are available to us during an emergency. Radio, for example, is kind of the standard for day-to-day public safety communications. We do have some satellite capability as well. And also the computer, the laptop computer in particular, is becoming increasingly important for coordinating and communicating during a disaster. But today we're going to focus on the standard desk telephone, and we're also going to focus on the cell phone. Future presentations will cover some of the other communication tools that I have mentioned here. Now, after a disaster, we may encounter several challenges associated with communications. First and foremost, we may see a damage to cell towers in the community, which may reduce capacity or eliminate our ability to actually utilize cellular to communicate. We may also see power disruptions. Power disruptions have a cascading effect because some of the tools that we rely upon for normal communications may be unavailable if there is no power available either at home or in the office. Also, one of the things that I have seen repeatedly in after-action reports from disasters that have occurred outside of our community is congestion. Congestion on communications occurs when a whole bunch of people, nationally or internationally, hear about a local disaster and attempt to make contact with either loved ones or business associates. All of those people trying to call simultaneously can cause significant congestion and reduce or eliminate the ability to communicate via standard telephone or desk phone. Now, in my opinion as a technologist, the most important tool that we have available to us exists in our pockets. Basically, the cell phone is a Swiss Army knife of communication capability, especially during a disaster. Number one, it can communicate using cell towers, your cell phone. Additionally, a phone can use what's known as Wi-Fi calling. So basically, if cell towers happen to be offline, if a phone is connected to Wi-Fi, then you should be able to still make and receive phone calls. The phone also has a variety of messaging apps available. This is iMessage, this is Microsoft Teams, this is Facebook Messenger, which may be alternative methods of communicating if all else fails. Now, when it comes to setup and preparation of your cell phone for crisis communications, I have a series of recommendations. First and foremost, I recommend FIRSTNET, which I think is the best tool both for a personal line of service or for a business line of service, and we'll talk about FIRSTNET in just a couple of moments. Number two, I recommend connecting your phone to your home internet. What that will allow you to do is set up what's known as Wi-Fi calling. Wi-Fi calling, as I mentioned before, is useful in the event that cellular communications are down. It basically allows you to accept and receive calls using a traditional Wi-Fi network. And incidentally, Wi-Fi calling works really well over the Salt Lake City government wireless network. I also recommend getting personal hotspot for your personal or for your business phone. It costs like maybe $5 to $10 extra per month, and what it does is it turns your phone into a Wi-Fi hotspot if you need it. After the earthquake of 2020 in Salt Lake City, several EOC members reported that their home power went out. And so basically, if you have Wi-Fi personal hotspots set up on your phone, you should still be able to utilize the internet with a laptop computer. There are also a couple of different tools that I recommend installed on the phone. First of all is the PTS app, which we'll talk about in just a sec. I recommend Microsoft Teams. Teams is becoming increasingly useful for disaster communications, as we saw in the earthquake of 2020. I also recommend wave radio. Wave radio will be a topic of conversation during the presentation on radio communications. And what wave does is it allows you to monitor radio traffic and also to communicate over the radio using your phone. Finally, of course, I recommend city email. Make sure that's installed and ready to go because disaster communications, some of that will likely occur via email. So let's talk a little bit about FIRSTNET. FIRSTNET is an agency of the federal government that oversees the FIRSTNET program. FIRSTNET uses the AT&T network for communications, and basically AT&T provides all of the technical support associated with FIRSTNET. FIRSTNET was born as a result of the 9/11 Commission recommendation saying that first responders need the ability to be able to get priority access over a cellular network in the event of need. So just as we are authorized to operate emergency vehicles and bypass congestion when appropriate, we also have, with FIRSTNET, the ability of having priority calling, the ability to get to the front of the line if we need to, and we also have a certain amount of emergency operations center control. So we can dial in and say, okay, these users need to have priority over these users on the network. Now, I am not saying that the other wireless carriers, Verizon, Sprint, and T-Mobile, don't offer good service, because they do situationally. I'm simply saying that FIRSTNET is, for emergency operations, the best tool available to us. So my recommendations are these. Number one, if you are a department director or in a position of responsibility over cellular, I recommend either adopting FIRSTNET for all of your staff members for their business lines of service, or for those key positions that will benefit from FIRSTNET in the event that we have disaster operations. And if you are an emergency staff member, so you're a first responder, including 911, or if you do work for the EOC, you basically can get FIRSTNET service for your personal phone. Essentially what you'll do is you'll go into AT&T retail, you'll have to have your government-issued ID, and you'll also need to give the code Salt Lake EOC when you go there. So essentially it's your phone, it's your line of service, you pay for it, but you're on the FIRSTNET network. Now, it should be pointed out that FIRSTNET is not a silver bullet for emergency communications. Basically, FIRSTNET only provides priority and preemption for those users that are on the FIRSTNET network. But if a FIRSTNET user tries to make contact with someone's desk phone or to another wireless carrier such as Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, then there's a chance that basically they may not be able to get through because those other networks don't necessarily see the number that you're calling from as having priority unless you use one of the following tools. The first one is known as GETS, which is Government Emergency Telecommunication Service. GETS is used for traditional landline phones or for desk phones. The other service that's available is known as Wireless Priority Service. Wireless Priority Service is essentially cell phone to cell phone. So let me give you an example. You pick up your cell phone, you're on FIRSTNET, you call somebody's landline and get a message saying all circuits are busy. At that point in time, you would use GETS. Let's say that you are on your cell phone, your FIRSTNET phone, and you're trying to call someone who's on Verizon or T-Mobile. You get that message saying all circuits are busy. That's when you would use WPS, or Wireless Priority Service. So the way Wireless Priority Service works is once you have access to the system, you basically dial *272 and then the phone number essentially. And that will tell T-Mobile, Verizon, whatever network you're calling that, hey, this is a government responder, and basically you should have priority to be able to gain access to those networks. Once you have access, I recommend getting the PTS Dialer app, which I'll demonstrate in just a sec, and practice using Wireless Priority Service. On the GETS side of things, when you receive authorization to use GETS, you'll receive a card that looks like this. It'll basically have your name, there's a phone number, and then you'll also have a PIN code here. So you'll dial 1-710-627-4387. After the tone, you enter your PIN number, and then when you're prompted, you'll dial the area code plus the phone number. Now, I have a tendency to lose cards that I get, so if you're like me, what I recommend doing is actually scanning your card and printing it out, putting it someplace close to your desk phone so that it'll be available for you when you need it. Now, as I mentioned, you need to have authorization from the Department of Homeland Security to use GETS or WPS. And the way that you do that is to go to this web page. It's wps.slceoc.com. That's wps.slceoc.com. That will direct you to an emergency management web page, which will provide additional instructions. I also strongly recommend, once you have access and authorization to use these programs, to get an app known as the PTS Dialer. This is available from both the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, and basically it makes the process of dialing using these two programs incredibly efficient. Let me give you a quick demonstration of how it works. So I've just pulled up my cell phone and I have downloaded the GETS WPS PTS Dialer app. When I open this up for the first time, what it's going to ask me to do is give authorization to access the contacts that are on the phone. That's totally up to you, but I recommend go ahead and doing it. That way you can easily dial any of your contacts using GETS or WPS. The second thing you want to go ahead and do is hit these three dots in the upper right hand corner of the screen and go to Settings. What you'll do is you'll go ahead and take the GETS pin from your card and put it into this very top spot. That will let the app know what your PIN number is, so that when you're dialing via GETS, it will automatically insert the number for you and you don't actually have to put it in. As far as everything else on the screen, I recommend just leaving things as they are. So when you're ready to make a call using the PTS dialer, you'll go to the keypad and you'll either access a contact or you can dial the number directly. I'm going to hit dial, and basically it gives you a series of options. Number one, you can dial this number using WPS, you can dial this number using GETS, or you can try doing actually both at the same time. The WPS plus GETS option would be particularly useful if you don't know the network of the person you're trying to make contact with. So in this case, I'm going to go with WPS. It's going to ask me to call. You'll notice it's doing the *272 in front of the number. And I'm calling my desk phone. And there it is. So that's pretty much it as far as the app goes. I recommend when you get authorization to use WPS and GETS and you download the app, make some test calls to make sure everything is working, and more importantly, that you have familiarity with how to use the app in the event of need. So that's pretty much it as far as this presentation goes. If you need help with anything at all, you're welcome to go ahead and make contact with either myself. My number is 801-799-3510, and your best point of contact for anything regarding WPS or GETS is Eric Witt with Emergency Management. He can be reached at area code 801-799-3602. Thank you for your time.